I was going to be happy if I wasn't moving forward because I would have known that God didn't want me to be the mayor. But now I feel very confident that I am going to continue to work hard, learn everything I need to learn.
Now, when we left you last night, after the in-person voting had been counted, the difference between second and third place was 41,000 votes. So here are the most recent numbers. As it stands,
by both reporters as well as some of his supporters who were outside on the sidewalk.
Today on California Reports, the night Los Angeles found out who its next mayor would run against, one campaign didn't wait to celebrate. It went straight on offense. Los Angeles has its matchup, not the one most people expected in January, not the one cable news spent 5 months hyping. In November, voters choose between a sitting mayor, finishing what may be her last campaign, and a city councilwoman who spent 6 years building the most organized force on the left flank of LA.
You know who I am. I have devoted my entire life to serving the city that I love, where I was born, and I'm going to continue to do that all the way to victory in November.
Politics, and who her own former allies aren't all sure they trust. This is the story of how Karen Bass and Nithya Raman ended up here, what each of their records actually says, and why national Democrats are watching Los Angeles the same way they watched New York. Roll it back to June 2nd. 14 candidates were on the ballot for mayor of Los Angeles, but really only 3 ever mattered. Bass, the incumbent, Spencer Pratt, the reality TV star turned Republican challenger whose Pacific Palisades home burned in the January 2025 fires, and Raman, the Silver Lake City Councilwoman who'd endorsed Bass just 2 years earlier before jumping into the race herself. For a few days, it looked like Pratt had it. He led Raman by roughly 7 to 8 points as votes were still being counted. But as late mail ballots kept getting processed through that first week of June, the gap closed, then flipped. By June 8th, the Associated Press and every major network had projected the same outcome. Raman had overtaken Pratt for second place. Final numbers had Bass at 34.3%, Raman at 28.5%, and Pratt eliminated at just under 26. 14 candidates, 2 left standing. What makes this race unusual isn't just who's running, it's who picked sides. Kamala Harris endorsed Bass on May 4th before the primary was even decided. Most of the city's labor unions lined up behind her too. And in a move that stung Raman's campaign more than almost anything else,
I'm ready to lead the city with seriousness, accountability, urgency, and ambition that is equal to this moment.
City Councilwoman Nithya Raman jumped into the race for Los Angeles Mayor Saturday. She says the city needs big changes.
Not one, but 3 of her own ideological allies on the city council, Eunices Hernandez, Isabel Jurado, and Hugo Soto Martinez, all 3 DSA-backed members of the same progressive bloc Raman helped build, endorsed Bass instead. That's not a minor defection. Hernandez, Jurado, and Soto Martinez are the same 3 council members who, alongside Raman, have routinely voted together against police spending increases and new anti-encampment zones. When all 3 of them break for the mayor instead of her, it's the clearest sign yet that Raman's own coalition doesn't see this as a clean progressive versus establishment fight.
Yes, I have been a member of the DSA for a number of years, and I'm not trying to hide that fact from anybody. But I will say I've also been a very effective representative for my district.
When she unseated a sitting council member in 2020 and became the first Democratic Socialists of America endorsed candidate to win office in Los Angeles. 6 years later, she's the establishment's most direct threat and its most searchable target. So what has 6 years actually looked like? Raman ran in 2020 on a platform that included redirecting police funding, a position that made her the first DSA-backed winner in city history. In office, she voted to expand the LAPD's budget in 2021, 2022, and 2023, while also opposing a package of police raises in 2023, and just weeks before this year's primary, voting against hiring 170 additional officers Base wanted. That gap between the 2020 campaign and the governing record is one of the most contested threads in her mayoral run, and it's corroborated across multiple outlets and the council's own voting record, not just one source. Here's a second flashpoint from her own coalition. In 2024, Raman accepted an endorsement from Democrats for Israel Los Angeles, a group that opposed a ceasefire in Gaza. The backlash from the left was immediate. The local DSA chapter formally censured her over it, while choosing to keep its endorsement of her council re-election. 2 years later, when another DSA member, Ray Huang, ran in the same mayoral primary on a more explicitly left platform, the local chapter declined to reopen its endorsement process for either of them. And this cycle, Democrats for Israel Los Angeles endorsed Bass instead. That fracture matters because it undercuts the simplest version of this race, Bass the Machine versus Raman the insurgent. The truth is messier. Raman has spent 6 years trying to hold together a coalition that doesn't fully trust her, while running against a mayor whose own coalition now includes 3 of Raman's former allies. If one moment defined how Raman's opponents plan to run against her, it happened in May. She introduced a motion asking city officials to study restricting backyard barbecues, fire pits, and other open flames on red flag warning days, wildfire risk days when winds are highest. It was a narrow technical proposal. It did not survive contact with a mayoral campaign. Within days, flyers reading "No barbecue for you, vote Raman for mayor" were posted on utility poles in her own Silver Lake neighborhood, funded by a group called Safe Cities USA. Days before that, activists had staged a mock homeless encampment directly outside her house on Memorial Day. Bass is asking voters for a second term while defending a set of numbers that got a lot harder to defend this year. A court-ordered independent audit, released in March 2025 by the consulting firm Alvarez and Marsal, found the city had failed to properly track roughly $2.4 billion in homelessness spending between 2020 and 2024, with auditors often unable to verify that services being invoiced were actually delivered. The audit itself isn't new, but its political fallout is still landing now. LA County has moved to pull its funding from the joint city-county homelessness agency and stand up its own department, triggering layoffs. Bass has pointed to real numbers of her own, a reported 10% drop in citywide homelessness in the most recent point-in-time count, the first decrease in years. But her critics point to her own 2026-27 budget, cutting homelessness funding even as the audit fallout was still unfolding. And that's before you get to the wildfire recovery, where the city's water utility is facing separate legal exposure tied to its handling of reservoirs during the January 2025 fires. 7 months before Los Angeles voters headed to the polls, New York City elected Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist who beat an established Democratic figure first in the primary, then again in the general reporters covering LA. Have openly asked whether Raman's rise is the start of the same story here, comparisons her own supporters have pushed back on, noting Raman hasn't built anything close to the coalition or national profile Mamdani had. Here's what the next 5 months actually come down to. Los Angeles registered Democrats outnumber Republicans roughly 4-1, which is part of why Pratt, despite drawing national conservative attention, was always the longer shot. That math is gone now. This is a race entirely within the Democratic coalition, between its establishment wing and its organized left. Bass says this is her last campaign for office, after 12 years in Congress and a term as California Assembly Speaker before that. Raman says if she loses this one, it's her last campaign too. Both of them are treating November 3rd as close to final as it gets. Open questions are the ones neither campaign can fully control. Whether the LASA audit fallout keeps growing before November, whether the water utility litigation produces damaging headlines, and whether the backyard barbecue backlash fades or hardens into the defining image of Raman's campaign, we'll be following every debate, every filing, and every new development between now and November. If there's a specific angle of this race you want us to dig into next, the homelessness numbers, the water utility litigation, or Raman's council record, tell us in the comments. That's what we're covering next on California Reports.